Over the 15 years that I've been building Doom maps, it's only in recent years that I've discovered some techniques that make the game more enjoyable for players. These are tricks that I used a lot in Doom 0, and although I'm probably not the first person to figure this stuff out, I'm going to show you some of my favorite advanced methods of vanilla Doom mapping that I've come to use a lot in all of my maps moving forward. So here I have a demon, and I've put some invisible walls so that the demon cannot move away from the lift. So the first trick I learned is that instead of just creating multiple sectors that represent one object or one lift or door or whatever it may be, let's try to make two objects out of one sector. So here I'm going to be taking a piece of this sector, then I'm going to sever these two pieces, but make no mistake, these two sectors are not separate sectors, they are the same sector. Now there are some limits, meaning that whatever happens to the one will have to happen to the other. Each sector has to be the exact same height, the exact same light levels, have the exact same ceiling and floor flats or textures. Now there's several reasons why you would want this, and I will show you. You can have two separate lifts that move exactly in synchronous with each other. This allows for creating unique different kinds of obstacles that the player may have to overcome. It also can be used as a method of showing the player what the state of the other object is without seeing the other object. Now, how is that useful? Well, it's up to you. What interesting ideas can you come up with? But one thing I will say is using this technique on doors, there are some definite things that we can benefit from it. For starters, instead of having the door move all the way to the top of the ceiling, you can have the door just stop at a certain height because of the neighboring sector where the clone sector is prevents it from going higher, because the door can only go as high as the lowest neighboring sector will allow. This is really useful if you need the door to always be visible even when it's open. Like maybe the door itself is color-coded, or maybe you just don't feel like having the door go all the way to the top. Maybe you just want it to stop halfway. Let's take a unique scenario. Let's say the player needs to get through a door, but the door is locked, and the player doesn't know how to open the door. Now, normally I wouldn't use a normal door texture for this. I'd use a completely different texture. But if this door has a clone door that can be opened by another monster, then the monster can be the trigger to open the door. Why would you want to use this? Again, it's up to you. Maybe you want to do a really cool trap where when one monster opens a door, it will open all the other doors in the room, revealing a whole bunch of monsters surrounding you, or any other reasons why you would want a whole bunch of doors to open at the same time. If you don't want a more traditional way of having a door open, maybe you want the player making a noise be the trigger that makes all of the doors in the whole room open. One of the things about Doom's physics engine is that a lot of the elements that doesn't necessarily need to be calculated on the Z-axis or anything that's vertically related. So like for instance, hitboxes of enemies in vanilla Doom is infinitely tall. Well, one of those side effects is that when there's a switch that's really close to the edge of a sector, and even if you're really below that switch, you can still reach that switch. And sometimes reaching that switch will actually break the continuity of your map. So there is a way to actually prevent this from happening if you don't want it to happen in your specific map. So what you need to do is you need to select the adjacent line def near the switch, right click, and then create a tag that you will never use. Like I like to use 555, like the Hollywood phone number. Do not add the same tag to a sector. Then you select an action, can be any action as long as it's SR, so that it has to be switch related and it has to be a repeating switch related thing, or else if it's just S1 and just pressing the wall once will deactivate it, and then you'll be able to hit the switch, which you don't want. And as you can see, I try to hit the wall, nothing happens. Cannot lower the lift, cannot activate the switch. I actually have to find another way to get up onto that platform in order to activate the switch. So here I just created a big room with the pit in the middle. And if you have a bunch of monsters in the pit, so we'll just take a normal pinky demon, put a bunch of them in here. So those that are very familiar with vanilla Doom might have encountered this issue more than a few times. because of the infinitely high hitboxes in vanilla Doom, sometimes trying to go down into a pit is a real pain, because there's a monster blocking you from jumping down into the pit. So the only way to fix this, you think, would be add a little border that blocks monsters. Well, here's the problem with that. It doesn't just block monsters that walk around, but it also blocks monsters that can fly, which is not a good system. So there's a better way of doing it. Instead of just creating one barrier, create two barriers, and then make these two barriers as close to each other as possible. Just do 1 pixel apart. And then what we'll do is we'll select this really thin sector that's surrounding these demons and just bring it down 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. I do 4 to make sure that the player doesn't see this little sliver, which means you should not add a texture because we want it to be totally invisible. And then we need to move these lines 1 block away from the edge of the pit so that when you test the map, you can go down into the pit, you'll still fall into the pit, but the monsters will still be close enough to you that they can still harm you. So it doesn't completely block them, but it gives you a big enough space for you to be able to fall into the pit, since the player's hitbox is exactly 1 block wide, which means that if you add cacodemons or other flying monsters, they'll be able to chase you and not be blocked by an invisible wall. So let's create some bars. Now one of the ways I like doing it is I like to make it 1 big sector and then divide it up. And you guys know how annoying it is sometimes when there isn't a switch and you have to hit the bars themselves. Sometimes you keep missing the bar because they're so small, so you have to aim carefully. This is especially painful if you're playing on a controller or keyboard only with no mouse. We'll make the bars pretty thin. Then we delete the lines, because we're going to have to create new lines. There's no particular reason for it. I think it just makes it less buggy. Then we'll create a bunch of new lines, attach it to the bars. Now make sure that these lines are facing in the direction where the player will be opening them. And then what we'll do is we'll highlight all of the front facing lines, including the ones on the bars themselves. Right click, give a tag, and instead of selecting D for door, select S for switch. I like to do S1 for yellow because I'm using a yellow texture, so you need a yellow key to open this door, but it doesn't matter what kind of door opener you use as long as it's a switch. And put in the same number tag for the sectors that the lines need to manipulate. And when you test it, and then you can hit anywhere between the bars and the bars will open. It'll be more streamlined, less finicky for players, and it's going to be so much better. You know, just flow nicer. And it's such a tiny little thing that you add, but these little quality of life improvements just makes the experience better overall.